Hello everyone, welcome back to Ruby Lessons and Code Academy. So in the last lesson we finished a project of making our own class, a computer, and then using it. At the end we also kind of developed it on our very own. Today we are still going to be looking at or object-oriented programming rather, but I guess other parts of it and more detail hopefully, we will have to see. So today, or in this part, we're going to be looking at why some things need to be accessible everywhere and others not accessible everywhere. You might be wondering why this is. So possibly if you're the only one writing and using your software, then you might actually not have to give all of your program privileges to not access everything. But you might want to allow every part of your program to access everything else. However, if you aren't the only one using and developing your software, then you probably won't want to do that. Because in some cases, imagine you have a big team of programmers working on one massive project. You might not want to allow everybody else to use your function because that might interrupt the function and then just give a really bad result. Not because you want them to be less efficient, your peers to be less efficient, but because the end result is not going to be the correct one. This is where public and private methods come in. So public methods allow for an interface with the rest of the program. So they allow the rest of the program to use them basically anywhere. However, private methods are for the classes to do their own work undisturbed. So they don't want anyone else asking them anything, so they make themselves unreachable by other places. And if you did try to use them, they would probably just give you an error, which would prompt the other programmers on your team to just make another method or make their own method, so that your part is all working correctly. So instructions, check out the code in the editor. We've created a public about me method and a private bank account number method. Click Save and Submit Code to see what happens when we try to call the bank account number method from outside the class. Also, it can prevent hacking as well, in a way, because it wouldn't allow easy access to inside methods. Although it's mainly just used for less conflict between parts of code. In my research anyway, from what I know. So let's actually look at this. We have a class person, and that's the only class I can see over here. Eric is a person of age 26. Eric about me. So let's look at about me. So this part is public. So everything below the keyword public is going to be public unless something else is specified, which is private. So this is going to be private, this is going to be public. The initialize, well, it's initialize. That works differently. So anybody can use this, however, not everybody can use this. When we do this, about me, I am Eric and I am 26 years old. Good. However, when we try to run the private method, well, as I said, we get an error because, well, it's a private method. You're not allowed to use it. It's private. I don't want you to know my bank account number. So, moving on. Let's create our own. Let's build a class. So, first, we tell Ruby that we want to construct our class name. Don't forget to end your end class, so, like I normally do. Inside our class name is where we define our methods. Here we have method name followed by parameter. Yep. When we use this method, it will look like this. Method name, hello, of course. And before that, you would probably want to specify where you're getting it from. So either class name dot method name or the instance that you're calling it from. So like Eric dot method name. If our parameter above were hello, it would be assigned to our variable, class variable on the following line. What does it mean? Okay, again, don't forget to end your method name. So this would be parameter, or class variable would be equal to parameter. Instructions. First, create a class named dog, and create a method, initialize. I'm not going to check it this time, I trust myself. We are probably going to have to pass stuff to it, which is why we have the initialize, otherwise we wouldn't really need the initialize method. Allow initialize to accept two parameters, name and breed. So at name equals name, at breed equals breed, and that's triple E, don't know why. Inside your initialize method, assign those two parameters to the variables. Yep, fair enough. We have already done that. Save and submit code. There we go. We have already made the basis of our dog class. Going public. Great work. Now we'll get into the detail of public and private methods. So methods are public by default in Ruby, which means that our initialize method would be public initially, but you wouldn't really have any use for it, except unless it's inside of making it. So that's why you normally don't really see a specifier or a bound specifier, whatever it's called, in front of it. So methods are public by default, so if you don't specify public or private, your methods will be public. However, if they are under the private keyword anywhere until the end of the class definition, then they will be private. I did say private before, right? I did mean private. So your methods will be public. In this case, however, we want to make it clear to people reading our code which methods are public. We do this by putting public before our method definitions, like so. Which means we could just, if we really wanted to, put public there, because initialize is going to be public. Note that everything after the public keyword through the end of the class definition will now be public unless we say otherwise, as you can see. So we'll say otherwise in the next exercise, so we will say private probably. For now, let's add a public method called bark to dog. Def bark and that is not where I meant to go. The bark method should put woof. Good. And that's going to be public. Anybody can use it from outside the method, which is good. Private keep out. Perfect, but not all our Ruby methods should be public. Just as we use public to announce our public methods, we use private to specify our private ones, as we saw in the example when we started. So we have class name, public. This is going to be public. This is going to be private. Note how we use our semicolon trick from last time to write our empty method definitions on the line. Well, we don't have empty method definitions right now, so that's fine. And it doesn't really matter anyway. Private methods are just that. They're private to the object where they are defined. This means you can only call these methods from other code inside the object. So another way to say this is that the method cannot be called with an explicit receiver. You can call it through a different method. You can call this method through a different method which is public in the class. However, you can't call it directly. I don't really know how to say it in any other simpler way. Say you had one method that calls another method. If the first method that calls this other method is public and the second one is private, you can't call it. That is allowed because you're calling it from a function. So if you call a private method with something which is inside of the class, then that's fine because you are calling it from inside the class and that's allowed to access the private information. However, if you call it from outside, so say you had a wall. Let's make this the wall. Let's make password. That is not how you spell password. Let's make that private. Let's make name public. Let's make bank. Well, let's say we have another thing, public bank, because everybody can access a bank. Everybody can access your name. They can ask you for it, and you will probably give them it. A bank is going to have your password. A bank can access your password, and you can access your password through the bank. However, somebody else, you, cannot access my password directly. You would have to go to the bank and give them your information, and they will deny you the access or give you an error in our case. So hopefully this example makes sense. So that's basically how it works. Password is the private method, bank is a public method, you and me are just entities, I guess, or other methods that are trying to access stuff. So bank holds information about the password definition, and it can access this. However, I cannot access my password directly. Well, I can in my mind, but you definitely can't access my password directly. And that's basically what private allows you to do. Okay, so you've been using receivers all along. These are the objects on which methods are called. Whenever you call object.method, object is the receiver of the method. So in order to access private information, we have to create public methods that know how to get it. So the bank, in my example. This separates the private implementation from the public interface, and we'll go over this in more detail in the next two exercises. So instructions, for now what we need to do is add a private method called ID. The ID method should create an ID number instance variable and set it equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So at ID underscore number equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there we go. Moving on. ATTR reader attribute writer. We saw in the last lesson on classes that Ruby needs methods in order to access attributes. For instance, if we want to access a @name instance variable, we have to write something like this. So, well, no longer. We can use attribute reader to access a variable and attribute writer to change it. If we write, so let's look at this. So this is something new that we are just learning. Class person, so that's our class definition. Inside we have attribute reader name, so we are getting the name, and then writer name, we are writing it. I don't know what that's exactly going to do, but that is going to be explained soon. Define initialize, we have the initialize. Okay. Ruby does something like this for us automatically. So we have define name @name end, and define name equals value @name. Okay. Like magic, we can read and write variables as we please. We just pass our instance variables as symbols to attribute reader or attribute writer. So, okay. So through experimentation, I found out what it all means. Let's start off by going back slightly. So just a reminder, this is an implicit return. So implicitly, this is going to be @name is going to be returned. And what this function or method does is returns the name of the whatever the name is for that specific instance. So let's use an example. Let's use John equals person.new and John with a job of, I don't know, builder. It's just the first thing that's popping into my head. So if we were to call the method name, so John.name, and puts John.name, we would get his name, which is John. Good. So that's all good. We could also do it like that. We should get the same result, because normally you should use parentheses if it's a function. Or a method, I mean. Sorry. Function methods, quite similar. However, there is another way of writing this. So this, it's all fine. However, we can write it as attribute reader name. We can just replace the whole thing with one line of code. And now, if we save and submit, let's just reload just to show you that it does actually work, because sometimes Codecademy makes problems if you don't reload it. If we save and submit code, as you can see, we get John with just one line of code. And if we do not have that line of code, well, let's reload again. If we don't have that line of code, then we are going to get an error, as you can see, because, well, we have no method that gets the John's name. So that's fine. Hopefully that's clear. Now moving on to our other method, which is the writer. So what that does is, if we try to do John.name equals, and then let's change his name to Bob, and then we again do John.name, we should get Bob. Let's reload that. Actually, that should be an equal to, and this should be passed in like a function or a method. Oh, actually, we are trying to change the job, not his name. Sorry. I guess we don't want to change people's names. His job, instead of a builder, can be... what? A window cleaner. Again, connected to buildings, which is why I'm getting it. So, and then, well, we can't really access his job, but we can make our another method, which we have already used, attribute reader, and for job, John.job, not njob, just job. We get window cleaner now. And we have changed his job like that. Let's see if this also works. Let's reload, just to make sure that it does work. And there we go. So that changed his job using this method. However, we can do this in one line as well. To do that in one line, we can just copy this over, attribute writer, and instead of name here we can have job, and we are going to get the same result. Let's reload just to prove that does work. As you can see, we get the same result. And we, instead of having to use up 3 lines of code, we've only used up 1 line of code. So that's maybe not more efficient. It might be the same efficiency, but we have used less space. And we would be repeating ourselves less, which is why you would want to use attribute reader and attribute writer instead of these old methods. You can use either one, but these are recommended. So moving on to, again, something similar, I'm going to guess, we have, if we want to both read and write a particular variable, there's an even shorter shortcut than using attribute reader and attribute writer. So you would use them separately if you only want to allow one or the other, because sometimes you want to give read-only privileges to a user. I don't know why you would give write-only privileges, but I guess it can be useful sometimes in programming. So if you wanted to give them both, then you can use attribute accessor to make a variable readable and writable in one fell sweep. So instead of having to use up 6 lines, you use up 1 line. Instructions, here we have an attribute reader and an attribute writer for job. Go ahead and replace these two with attribute accessor. So again, quite simple. Reader, writer for job. We replace it. Keep the indentation correct. For job. You use it in the exact same way that you would use it before. It's just the definition inside the class that's different. You would still do John.name equals or John.name to get the output. So hopefully that makes sense. If you have any questions, do feel free to ask in the comments down below. I will answer them as soon as possible. I will also be away next week, so do please ask them sooner rather than later, or because I might not be able to answer them next week. I'm sure either others could, or once I get back, I will be able to answer them. There will be videos next week, by the way. I have planned them out. So if you enjoyed watching this video, please give it a like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't, then dislike and tell me in the comments why you disliked it so that I can improve for next time. But until that next time, thank you so much for watching and goodbye.